Well, good morning. All right. Well, welcome to our lovely topic of process improvement. Three announcements of awkwardness. In a room this small, I would usually throw the mic out because people can hear me. We are recording, so I am not going to be, I'm not allowed to go over there. So if I look like I'm stuck here and terrified, that's why. Number two, Amy Vetter has warned me that if I'm too loud, they're going to pound on the wall and I have to shut up. So if just midway through I just stop talking, I fear Amy, so I'm going to just stop. So, and number three, I walked in here and I realized that I was wearing the same shirt. So I promise. I mean, I met a few of you and I had different shirts on the last couple days, but yeah. So I'm Jim Boomer, CEO with Boomer Consulting. So we work with only public accounting firms and primarily mid to large size. So I'm going to talk process improvement. I know, how many of you are with public accounting firms? Okay, so a good number, and the rest of you aren't. And I'm going to try my best to not fall into only talking about firms, but my examples are going to be tax and audit. But I want you to keep in mind, even though I'm talking about that, this is relevant to any business. I mean, we're a consulting company. We don't do tax and audit, and we apply these same concepts within our own business to continuously improve and be better. And so with that, a little bit about who I am. I won't go through those, but my background. So as you can tell, Jim Boomer and Boomer Consulting, everybody wonders whether, I founded the company. I did not. So I'm second generation. My father founded the company out of a regional CPA firm. I started my career with Arthur Andersen. Yeah. A few chuckles. Actually, my very first job was working at my father's accounting firm. And what do you think I was doing for them? Shredding documents. So, yes, I had no involvement in Enron, but it was an early learning experience in my career. Went over to Bearing Point in a group hire. And they didn't fare so well, but that was after I left. So I always say, it's either third time's the charm or third strike and I'm out. And with the thing that my father built, I'm sure hoping it's not the latter. So that's it. That's who I am. So when my father started the business, we were really focused on technology and helping firms in their strategy and roadmap around technology, getting the right people, governance, all of that. We've expanded now, our team has grown, and we really help firms, we guide them really to future readiness and how do you prepare to be successful in the future. And so you can't just focus on technology to do that. That's an important part of your business, but it starts with the leadership and the mindset. And we work with firms on that, having the right talent and the right talent strategies. We still do the technology work, and then process, which is where we're going to focus today. We apply the Lean Six Sigma methodology within CPA firms. So it's not necessarily where Lean Six Sigma started, but it's applicable to any organization, any business, any process that you have. You can go through this and improve. And then the final kind of pillar is growth. So we're based, I would say loosely based in Kansas City. That's where I'm from. But we're a virtual team. Probably 7 years pre-pandemic, we were virtual. And we have team members coast to coast. So that's who I am and who Boomer Consulting is. So really what we're talking about, and I think David set it up yesterday, of talking about transformation, and all businesses are going through it. Both a digital transformation and an overall business transformation. And I know our clients are doing it. So in the CPA firm world, it's really a move beyond just compliance services to more advisory and consulting. And I think, Joe, I would agree with your comment yesterday of like 90% of what's being called advisory is really bookkeeping plus. I don't like the term bookkeeping. It's accounting plus. It's not necessarily getting into the strategy work and the stuff that's going to really get you deep relationships and actually demand the higher profitability that everybody's talking about. That's a hard transition that has to happen because of skill sets, mindsets, tool sets that all have to be evolved and upskilled, and it's a different world. So it's all about this transformation, but you can't go through this transformation if you're so busy doing the things that you've always done in the past. So we have to slow down, step back, look at processes and say, how can we do this better? How can we leverage technology to automate the things that, frankly, it might scare people because is this going to take my job? But no, it's going to make your job better. It's going to get rid of all the things that you hate doing and nobody wants to do. Either you're going to give it to technology, you're going to outsource it, or you're going to put it in the hands of the right person who your trash is their treasure. Like, you hate doing it, but somebody else, that's their unique ability, and they're like, give it to me. And they're going to do it a lot more efficiently and a lot more effectively. So, so really specifically on digital transformation, I just wanted to spend a minute here. We focus on this because we've got to be adopting technology and moving with the rest of the world and our lives. We think about how we operate, and we're used to being able to do most things from our phone. And so if people are encountering your business and they're still having to deal with paper and antiquated processes, they're gonna not have the best client experience. So that's bottom line. That's what this is all about. Is a good process. It evolves based on the voice of the client. So the benefits are really a better client experience, and that's a client both internal and external. So your team are clients of the business. And so you have internal processes too that need to be focused on reducing friction. And then, along comes productivity and greater profitability. So how do we do this? Well, I'd say when you think about process and you ask what's the quickest way to get it from point A to point B, it's a straight line. How many of our processes in our businesses look like this? Zero. And we may feel like we're relatively a straight line. And so when we talk to prospects and we're talking to managing partners, they're like, we're pretty good at our personal tax prep process, and I think we got it down. We do, and then you start to talk to the team, and they're like, no, it's different depending on every partner that I work for. I have all these decision trees to do the same task. I've got to do it 5 different ways, and you start to build it out. So that's in CPA firms. Is that you guys weren't CPA firms, right? And you're sitting there nodding, and that's in your business too, right? Yes. So personal preferences are a big part of it. So a big part of, and I'm going to talk about what Lean Six. How many of you are familiar with Lean Six Sigma? Okay, a few hands. Well, I'll get into layman's terms of what it is, but a big part of it is identifying waste. And so there are 9 categories of waste. We use the acronym downtime plus A. So I'll go through each of these. Defects. These are when you make mistakes or errors. They typically require you to go back and do it again. Overproduction, and I'm going to skip around because overproduction sounds a lot like excess processing, but they're different. Overproduction is doing more than is necessary. So it's when you've got a tax return going through your process, and you have to do like 3-4 reviews before you're okay to get it out. You're beating the heck out of that tax return, unnecessary, no value added to it. You should have been focused more on the quality and that there were, and finding the defects. So overproduction is doing more than necessary. Excess processing is doing any work or more work than the client values. So if you spend a whole lot of time figuring out what header is perfect to send out on your letters, that is excess processing, because nobody cares. But I know from my time at Arthur Andersen and Bearing Point, people there care. Like, it needs to be perfect, and it needs to be in this format because that's how I want to see it go out. And it's a representation of me. And now I look back and I should have said, well, you're not being represented because nobody's paying attention to that. They're reading what it says. They don't go, wow, that's a nice header. I like where they put the page number, that it's over on the left and it's not in the center. That's unique. No. So excess processing is the client doesn't necessarily value it, or your customer. Waiting is any time you're sitting there waiting between touches in a process, whether that's with the customer or client or internal. And so we got to look at where do we sit around and wait for things to go to the next step. Non-utilized talent. This is kind of the trash and treasure I was talking about. This is having the right people in the right job at the right time. So the example I would give is with a lot of our clients, they will assign a staff person to, on simple returns, they would say, you're in charge of this client and this return. And they would handle from the beginning of the process to pretty much the end. They might not play in the processing, the printing and everything, but the delivery and everything. No, there's all kinds of steps in there that don't need a CPA to do it, they don't want to do it. They hate it. They're not good at it. It's lower priority. And so then that leads to waiting. But if you gave it to somebody in operations or admin, all of a sudden they're like, this is the stuff I live for. And they're on top of it. They're getting things moving, and they're getting information back from the client. So if you don't have the right people in the right seats on the right bus, then your process is going to be not as effective and efficient. And you'll notice I keep saying effective and efficient. And when I get into Lean Six Sigma definition, you'll understand that a little more. Transportation is not just moving around of information. This is actually paper that is being transported around. And, you know, we're living in this digital world that still has a heck of a lot of paper. I go into clients and there's stacks of paper around. So even though they're, quote, paperless, it's about less paper, but they still have a lot of it. And so if you're passing around paper documents, you've got some transportation potential opportunities to improve. Inventory, for our clients, that would be work in process. For a manufacturing company, that would be the product that sits around. We're always a proponent of firms, our clients, doing a first in, first out FIFO method. But too many of them, what we find is the fish method. So first in, still here. And again, it probably goes back to a lot of personal preferences. Partners came in and said, this is my A client. We got to move this and jump those. And so this one sits here, or it's complex and it needs to wait on a particular person to work on it. So inventory is another. Motion is when you're hunting for information. So you don't know where to find that document that you need. You don't know which system that you go into to get the most accurate customer or client data. So you're on this scavenger hunt. Anybody have that? Yes. I know we do. I mean, you end up with systems that have multiple redundant copies of the same information. You're like, which one do I use? So, but that's motion. I talked about excess processing, and then A is attitude. Most important one, having leadership bought in that this is important, and giving their team the time, authority to go and make it better is the top thing and the top wasteful activity. It's often top down, that attitude of, we do that because we've always done that and we've been around for 20, 30 years, and look, I built a successful business, so why do we need to change? You can't have that. You got to have the, I know that I'm not perfect. I know our business is not perfect. I know that we can improve. Let's find the places that we can improve. That's the mindset and attitude that organizations need. So, a question for the group: which of the 9 defects or categories of waste resonated with you, and did you think of an example that you see or can think of in your organization? So I'll go back to this.
I think the waiting part, but it comes down to what you're saying, it's not maybe.
Nope. I think I have to do this, right? Because of the video.
Thank you. I think the waiting part, but it maybe comes down to what you were saying, that it's maybe sitting with the wrong person. It's maybe sitting with a manager and they don't have time to do it. They're not delegating tasks enough. Probably
Yes.
That's a big one.
Very common. Somebody's overloaded because they're good at something, and it's waiting and it's sitting there, and likely somebody could get trained up and get those same skills and be another backup, so you don't have that. That's a good example. Anyone else? I know I'm between you and free time for the rest of the day, so it's like,
I'll give one quick.
Sit here.
I think internal at ExpensiCon, I think the two that hit on, I thought of one that we do well and one that I think there's a disconnect to. We're very good at motion. We move very quickly and our processes move fast. But the inventory one struck me, where sometimes some people operate in that FIFO method of, I'm just going to bang out first in, first out, go down my list regardless of priority. While there's a disconnect, right? While others, right, work on, okay, this is like third on my list, but it's a really important one, so I'm going to do that first. And when the motion hits the inventory part, there can be a further disconnect that can be multiplied between the two. Yeah.
Yep.
So these are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
They play off of each other.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I see.
Yeah.
For me, I'd say overproduction. The thing you said about always doing what was done in the past, I think accountants are very guilty of that. You do what was done last year, and you end up people will add things to it, and suddenly before you know it, you've got a bloated set of working papers that you don't need most of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a big one.
I was actually going to say the same, even at ExpensiCon. So we went public in November of 2021, had to become SOX compliant. We worked with Moss Adams and EY to do that. And it was crazy when we actually started writing down all of our processes to become compliant, how much we had to challenge ourselves to be like, well, why are we doing it? And it was the overproduction of just defaulting to doing what we've always done, or what even our advisors were advising to do. And just challenging that was a real challenge for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to sound funny, but I feel like, having listened to what you've said, I need to go back and thank my boss, because the nature of what we do is solving exactly that. And although I know it, and I've worked for the same company for 7 years, I didn't realize it. So he is both a CPA and a computer programmer. And the nature of what he has done with our organization is, as he has found these, he's just built technology to solve them as we go. And I mean, I know that innately, but having listened to this, I think I've just sort of hit the nail of wow, like I think he has done a very good job
That's
solving for this.
Yeah.
And without me really, I mean, I know it, but this sort of confirmed it.
Yeah, that's great. So right here, this attitude is what's driving that.
Completely.
And has driven building the business. But I wouldn't say that's common.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm realizing, right?
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I heard you talking before and you said you're a back rower. So you're in the front row now and you've already talked. It's a big step. Yeah, but you would have progressed to the back. So, yeah. And you were a back rower and now you're a front rower. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Jim, I've got one more, maybe you could repeat it for the
Yep. Yep.
Transportation, you mentioned being paper, but can it also be digital, progressing the digital document through a process? If you want to repeat that.
Yeah. So Joe's question was on transportation. I said it was paper, but could it be digital motion too, or digital transportation through the process? I would say that is more the flow of the process, because things are always moving, right? So what we're really focused on in terms of waste is the slowed down nature of the process and the old school way of doing things with in that transportation one. So it is really about paper documents. Yeah, good question though. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, I said, in the opening, I said nobody takes the time to step back and really put the process up on the wall. And so we have two of our consultants who are Lean Six Sigma black belts, and they will go in and facilitate initially a 2-day session, but it's really a year-long process of accountability calls and checking in and seeing where things went. But the initial step is the first 2 days and then another 2 days on site. So within those first 2 days, they spend a lot of time defining what they're trying to solve. Because if you go try to if you just say, we're going to go through a process improvement project, think about how many processes you have in your organization. And if you're thinking about it right now, probably double it, 10x it, because there's more of them. And so you really have to be clear of what are we trying to improve? Where's the starting point? Where's the ending point? So they define that. And then we go, all right, let's put it up on the wall. And we have all these process flow shapes that represent different things. So the ones I would point out that are the most important are the diamond, and that is where a decision is happening. That's where you identify personal preferences, because I could have 5 different lines going off of it, and you might say, what owner of the company, what partner of the firm am I working for? Well, I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to take this path. So you have multiple different things that could happen. This is the weighting. So you see there's a number of spots in this example where we're waiting. A process step is just something that's happening. The manual process is things that we shouldn't be doing manually and are probably doing paper. And so those are really highlighting transportation. Data is data moving around. And then the last one is something we're dependent on the client. So if they need to send us in source documents, that's what it shows. What I want to point out with this process flow is this is an example. This is actually one of our clients, and this is prettied up from what we would do in the working session. But you've got all of these decision points that are happening, and the red is when work is being sent back in the process. So you have these loops, and it might end up in a multiple time loop, hopefully not infinite loop, but it's slowing things down. And what they find a lot of times, then they're like, oh my gosh, we're way more messed up than we thought we were. So, there's a lot of work that gets done by the project team, and we lead them through this process. But typically what happens is they end up with something streamlined like this. There's always going to be exceptions to your process that you have to handle. And so it's very unlikely that you can get rid of any of the loops that happen, because we're human, we make mistakes. Sometimes we got to send it back and it has to get fixed. But you want to minimize those and find the ones that are unnecessary, of where we're sending things back and we can just keep it moving forward. So not only is it much more streamlined, but we break it down into phases. And what this allows organizations to do then is go, okay, do I have the right person working on this part of it? So in this case, it's requesting and receiving client data. The firms that go through this process typically have their CPAs reaching out to the client and asking, I need these documents, here's what I need. And they hate that. And then they got to track them down and follow up and all that. Whereas their operations or admin people would love to have that project. And so when you hand it to them, it gets done a lot quicker. So you're able to break down the process into phases and identify who is the best person to work on that phase, but also even within the phase, like specific steps, you can identify the who. So, where can this be used? I listed within our clients where we see a lot of them coming to us for help. They usually start with the things that are making them money, tax and audit. But then as they go, this paid off in the first year, we need to do this with other things. Our billing and collections is so antiquated and full of personal preferences, because every partner needs to do their bills and do them perfect, and they never get out. And then they don't want to upset anyone. So they're the only business in the world that doesn't follow up on money that's owed to them. So, when they get into billing and collections, there's a huge ROI. But really, that bottom line is the important point. Any process, you can apply this. Now, how deep you would go and apply the Lean Six Sigma methodology would depend on how big, how important of a process it is in your organization. If it's a critical one, I would say go through the full-blown process of process improvement. We've done this. We call them mini lean sprints. We'll take a smaller project and go, let's take the basic concepts and go through it quick with a smaller team and identify areas we can improve it. Here's some of the results that we've seen. And again, I apologize to our non-CPA firm. All of these are accounting firm specific, but you can see doubled the amount of returns completed and out the door by late February. Reduced turnaround time on partnership returns. 61% of returns were started earlier, so they were getting the information in the front door sooner. And then we have some of the examples of results on the audit side of the house as well. So people are recognizing real results, and it's not just about the old school measurements that most firms look at of realization, utilization. It's things that matter in getting things done. So I'm going to pause. Any questions up to this point?
How deep does it go? You might have to repeat it for the mic, but
Yep.
how deep do you go with the flow chart? Obviously, you're not going to get into how to prepare Schedule C. So that would be an extreme example. But my question is, what's represented in the flow chart, or what's sort of assumed by the training of what you're doing?
It's a good question. So how deep do you go in a process? And do you stay at the top level of someone does this as the next step, or then do you get into what this is? And that's really defined in the scope up front. You have to talk through those things. and say, and having worked with enough firms where we know areas like, let's say, onboarding. We have that discussion up front. Is onboarding going to be part client onboarding? Are we starting our analysis at the point where we start preparing the return? Like, where is that? So it's defined in definition, and it really depends on, again, how big of a sub task or process it is, and how important it is to the overall process of whether we have to dig in or not. It would also depend on if we have some personal preferences. As you're going through it and you put it up there and somebody wants to gloss over it, go, well, we do this. And then somebody chuckles and goes, well, you do that if you're working for this person. Now it's not one way, and we got to dig into it a little more. So great question. With not a definitive answer. So any processes that come to mind, jump out in your organization that you could improve?
Client onboarding and acceptance.
Yeah.
Because I still don't know how to do it.
I think you're probably not alone. Like, I would say even our organization, who's constantly looking at our processes, we could improve in our client onboarding and communication. That's a good one. Anyone else? Yeah.
So for like CAS, what type of processes do you actually how would you go about doing a process kind of review on that? Because you have all these different tech stacks and you have so many different clients that use various different other systems and things that, so what would be the best way to tackle that?
So you're right. There's a lot of different processes. You can't just say CAS, because it depends on where. Usually the client is coming because there's a pain that they know is there. They don't know how bad and what's causing it. But it's some part of their CAS group that they go, we're not doing this as well as we should. So let's say you're doing payroll. We would define that up front, that's what we're working on and defining. If it is bill pay, we do that too. So you really have to be clear, and you can't. It's a great question, and it emphasizes a point I probably should have made earlier. You can't choose something so broad that it means that there are all of these, now they're considered sub processes, but really they should be primary processes. You need to focus on what you're trying to do that one, then move on to the next one. And it becomes faster as you get some experience in going through it. You identify those categories of waste pretty quickly once you've gone through a process improvement project. So does that help? Okay.
It isn't so much a question as just, if we're going to think about what processes, I don't think in my organization we have any perfect processes. So that means by definition, every process can be improved. And I don't think we're a bad organization. Just there's always room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose the other thing that would jump to mind is that sometimes, especially, two people might have different ideas of what an improvement is. So I guess sometimes you will have to, I used the example about overworking earlier on. Some people might say, no, well, I really like that. I want to leave that in the working papers, for example. And it's trying to reach that middle ground where you can actually have everyone buying into how a process is actually improved, or whether that's not an improvement. So there's different elements of it, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm going to that's a great question. And I'm going to get into that, because I would say when I keep saying we do process improvement projects, only about 10 to 20% of it is actually process improvement work. Like, you could bang out this and come up with what's wrong with it and do this. But what you're talking about is buy-in and change leadership and actually rolling it out and getting people to follow it and realize why they're doing it, that's the rest of it. We are enabling those teams to be not just change managers, but change leaders, and think ahead of what are the pushbacks going to be, what are the questions going to be, and think through the answers to those so you come in well prepared to roll that out. So that's a great question, and a huge part of it is that leading the change and making sure that you get a buy-in and an adoption.
Now, Jim, playing off of that, and getting back to CAS, tax has a finite set of variables, and I know they're very complex returns, but compared to CAS, it has a finite set of variables. So does your firm teach the strategy? Because say you have 1,000 CAS clients. I mean, you're not going to go analyze 1,000 processes, right? Are you just training CAS leadership in how to analyze the processes? So you're trying to teaching the person to fish?
Well, yes and no. Like you wouldn't, I would hope if you had 1,000 CAS clients, you wouldn't be doing different processes for every single one of them. Yeah, there's variables in them. I mean, Flo, you brought up tech stack. That is one of them. But there's other variables there. You've got to stay at the level where you're talking about what's being done and getting consistency and standards and how it flows. And maybe you still have a decision point in your new process of which system do you use? If this, then here. If that, then over here. So yeah, because, and that's really why you're never going to get away from any decision points in any process, because exceptions will always exist. But what we often do is build our processes around the exceptions. And so that leads to the overproduction. We're doing it on every client because of this handful of clients that we have to do it on. So
That was powerful. I mean, I really want to make sure everybody heard what you just said. That's huge. That's huge.
yeah. Thank you. So here's where I'm going to come through on my promise and actually back up a bit and explain what this whole Lean Six Sigma that I'm talking about is about. So it was a methodology that really came out of manufacturing. It's been big in medical. It kind of came into the CPA profession probably really 10 years ago, maybe 15, and applied within CPA firms. And so what it is you have two separate methodologies that are coming together and merge of lean is where you're looking to become efficient. That's what we think about when we hear process improvement. That's where our mind naturally goes is, yeah, we could become more efficient in doing this, but that's not all of it. You can become very efficient in a process and do it terrible and create absolute garbage really quickly. You need to have quality, consistency coming out as your output. So you've got to marry it with the Six Sigma part of it, which is all about that. How do you deliver a quality product? How do you ensure quality? How do you find errors earlier on so you don't have all those loops and rework? And that gets you to, I had to redo this because when I pasted it over, I guess I didn't put the lean part. This is not the correct equation. You get the point. But ultimately, the goal is eliminating wasteful activities to optimize value from the client's point of view. Again, that's an important point because we could go through process improvement from the lens of how will this benefit our organization and our business and make our lives better, which would be great for our internal clients. But if we don't listen to the external client and what their experience is and what impacts that our decisions are having on them, then we're going to continue to have a flawed process. We may not continue to have a business, but so having a process for process improvement is critical here. So, I already talked about mindset when I went through the A and downtime plus A. It is the most important thing. You've got to start with mindset and talking through what are your anticipated barriers. And your comment of I want this in the working papers. It's because we've always done it this way. There's probably some of our clients won't use that when we're talking about technology. Every time I hear that, I'm like, well, have you sold yourself on this technology or this tool? And they're like, no, I really don't understand it. And I'm like, well, the reason is really because you don't understand it and you haven't sold yourself. So how are you going to ever sell anybody on the value of using this? And so we have to get past that. Nobody can do this right but me. I have years of experience at doing this, and it always has to come to me. The example was given of stuff piles up because the same person is, you're dependent on them. Well, make this so it's not true. and make it so there's a lot more who's who can do those things. We've always done it this way. I already said we tried that before and it didn't work, so it's not going to work now. Well, we're ever evolving. Our world is changing all the time. The technology we know is changing. That should never be a reason you're not going to go back and try something if you think that it will improve it based on the changes. So evaluating the mindset's number one. Then looking at the team that you have currently. And so this goes deeper than process improvement. This goes into what firms, our clients, well, really any business needs to be successful, to have that mindset of continuous improvement. And like your founder it builds the business in that mindset, you have to have a vision of where you want to go. And so create, and another one didn't come over, experience is the fifth kind of question. We use this framework with partners to have them not just talk about the same success metrics and all the financial stuff of what our vision is for the future. These are words that create an emotional response, and it helps them paint that descriptive picture of what they want their organization to be in 3 years, 5 years. So putting that stake in the sand of what they want the organization to be, that's going to drive a huge part of what processes are most important, how you go about doing things. What is your end game goal that you're trying to achieve? Having the right level of communication. You can have too much, we know that, and you can obviously have too little. So you have to find that right balance. Not everybody receives communication at their best in one way. So you've got to have different vehicles for it. Building the team up, upskilling them, and making sure you're putting people in the right spots in their unique abilities. And then we lead peer groups with leaders from firms on a regular basis. And Joe does something similar. It is an important part of success is get outside your own four walls, talk to other people, because it's what you don't know that costs you a lot of time and money. And if you don't get out there in the world and come to events like this and build those relationships, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. And then having an innovative mindset and always looking to the future. We talked a little bit about change leadership, but this depicts what happens in most organizations. Everybody will agree we have opportunity to improve and we need to change, and who actually wants to change, because when we're doing process improvement, we're really looking at it from the organizational perspective, but organizations don't actually change. It's each of us as individuals, and we don't make the decision that we might nod our head and say, yeah, that sounds like something we should definitely do. I'm on board. I promise I will follow this process, even though you changed it because of me, because I'm the greatest offender. I'm not going to actually make the decision until it's showtime. And I've got to either do it or say, well, it's easier if I just do it the way I've always done it. So we have to have somebody leading that. And there's usually nobody left in the room when we're asking who wants that job. It's not an easy job. And I can say it's often seen as sort of the fluff of a project, and it is the core of the project. When I was at Arthur Andersen, we do these huge software deployments, and we would try to encourage the client to also engage us in a change management team to come in, and they'd always be like, well, the project's too expensive already. We're going to cut that part of it. I'm like, well, then you're throwing your money away, because we're going to install something. Nobody's going to know how to use it. Nobody's going to adopt the change, and they're going to keep doing what they're doing. So really focusing on this change leadership is important. So we try to set the team up for success from the beginning. Okay, gotcha. Having a team-oriented, problem-solving Lean Six Sigma team. So this means you have a champion team leader, facilitator, and then cross-functional team members. So these are important roles. Your champion is somebody, so in our case, with our clients, it's a partner. It's somebody that has the political capital to provide resources, make decisions, and then use the hammer if necessary on other partners if they're not actually adopting and following through. Your team lead is somebody that is really critical to that particular process. It might be the senior manager over tax or whatever CAS project process that you're looking at. It's who leads that. A facilitator, usually when you're going through this at the beginning, you want, well, anytime I should say, the most important point is don't have someone facilitate that is deeply embedded in the process. Even if they have their green belt, black belt, if they are a critical part of the tax process and you're doing tax, don't have them facilitate. Have somebody from the outside. And even better, somebody outside your organization, because those people aren't scared to be dumb and say, why the heck are you doing that? If you have an internal person, they might be worried about dynamics and I don't want to offend this partner or owner by asking this question. If you have an outside facilitator, you get past that. And then having cross-functional subject experts. So in a tax example, we encourage them to have their technology leader in there because there's going to be ramifications there. Have somebody from audit and probably CAS too, because decisions that are being made in tax can have real consequences on the other processes as well. So some of the roadblocks, fear is a huge one. People are always worried that we're doing this because we're trying to do cost reduction, and oh no, are they coming for my job? Is the technology and automation so they can get rid of the humans and Chat GPT can do it all? These are the things that we have to think about. Going back to your question, I'm finally getting to it. Are things we need to be thinking ahead on. So expertise, like knowing when we have success and celebrating that is an important part of adoption. So we have to show the rest of the team, here, look, this partner has used it, and I put those results up there. Start capturing them and telling those stories. So I'm going to talk about this and then I'm going to go back to this one, but we have to start with the why. How many of you have read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why? It is all about getting to the heart of why you offer anything, why you're changing, but we need to answer 2 why questions. Why is it that we need to change? And why will this be better than the way we do it today? And so when we're working with project teams, we'll go through the categories of waste. We'll prioritize what are the biggest ones, and what could our ideas be to improve these. Then we think through, well, what are the pushbacks going to be? And we answer these 2 questions. And that's part of the messaging as we roll out. So I'll answer first, but I'd like to hear from others. What do you do to lead or manage resistant, especially leaders in your organization when you're trying to change something? And I would say one tip is put them on this problem-solving team. Involve them from the beginning and get their input of why they think that they need to have that in the working papers. And the rest of the team can have a conversation respectfully about what that impacts downstream, upstream, and the ramifications of doing that, and can also have a knowledgeable discussion about whether it's actually adding value to the client. So that would be my number one. Any other tips that you've had on managing resistant leaders?
This is less about leaders who have been in the organization for a long time, but certainly when we're hiring, I think part of our interview process is making sure that we're hiring people who buy into the concept of if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. Yeah. And that's part of our interview process. If you're not bought into that attitude right from the start, you're probably not a great fit for our organization to begin with.
Yes, that's great. I agree 100% with making sure you're hiring for the right attitude and your culture, and knowing it well, and then asking those right questions and start from the beginning. This is the number one question I often get around process improvement. Again, if you haven't gotten it at this point, I work with CPA firms. Did I say that? We got a lot of strong egos, mindsets within accounting firms, and you will inevitably have a lot of firms that have usually a partner that's close to retirement and is saying, I'm just a couple years out. I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it. And you're not going to make me do it. So one tip I talked about, put them on that team. If they're still like, no, I'm not, and they're disruptive, then there's some hard conversations that have to be had in firms. You're a couple years from retirement. We're not going to sit around for 2 years and wait for you to retire. We need to figure out a win-win and make this an amicable split, and figure out how we can do that now so that we can move ahead as an organization. So it's not an easy answer or an easy thing to do, but it is something that's necessary in order to improve.
This mostly relates to client relationship. So when you're doing high-level advisory service, how do you tactfully manage a leader that doesn't want to change? And you have to be more delicate in the process, because you cannot just say your process sucks. But at the same time, you're trying to drive change.
Yeah. So
how do you, from the outside, become effective at addressing
change? Oops, sorry. I skipped over. Where was I? Where am I looking? Here. Start with that. I kind of talked about it from an internal team perspective, but the same is true, is answer the why questions up front, and your clients, and where they're going to push back and say and be resistant. Get ahead of it, and when you're telling them about the change, be answering the why and the what's in it for me, and getting personal to that leader of why this is going to make their life better and easier from the beginning. Now, sometimes that doesn't work too, and you just have pain in the butt clients. And you got to have among your leadership, again, tough discussions of, are we going to let one client hold us back from being our best for everyone else? And so sometimes there's difficult external conversations that I don't think we're the best fit for you anymore. And we will help you find another firm that can serve you that still does everything paper-based. So I know am I done? Okay, this will take a second. So this is an important point. I think I've covered it. It's not just about the process, it's about applying technology as well. When I talked about having the right resources in the right place at the right time, that isn't just people, that is technology, that is outside resources that you could apply. But we always use this train analogy of if you have great processes which are equivalent to the straight tracks, but you're still rocking a steam engine, you're not going to get there as fast as you could. If you have a bullet train and you have a series of switchbacks and you got to continuously slow down and head different ways, you're going to be inefficient and ineffective. And so you want the bullet train with the straight tracks, bullet train being the technology, the tracks being your new streamlined process. Your step 4 is really identify, and this comes up front, like your success metrics. What are you trying to achieve and what does success look like? And I will just emphasize, these shouldn't be the things that you're, especially in CPA firms that are traditionally measured just about realization, utilization, that kind of thing. You need to be thinking through what are more effective KPIs. So looking at cycle time, the efficiency of the process and measuring that, because you can't manage what you don't track and you don't measure. And then there's getting clients on board, which we've kind of discussed. This is an important piece. I know I'm at the end, so I don't want you to take the impression that this isn't important. You have to come up with a communication plan and strategy to roll this out and make sure that you're getting your clients on board to move this forward. The last thing I will mention here is this is kind of a foundational piece of Lean Six Sigma, the DMAIC model. This is kind of how we walk through it. And I've talked through this as I've gone through, but we start with that define, know where you're going, your end game in mind, define the scope, what are we trying to improve? Then the measure is getting an assessment of where we are today and what our process looks like. Analyze it, look for areas of waste, come up with ideas of how we improve, and then build the plan of how we're going to communicate this and lead the change. And then control is about rolling out the new process and realizing that it's not just an event. Okay, we rolled it out, we're good, we're done. You're continuously improving. You're always striving for progress, not perfection. If a piece of the process is going to be too much to break the system, we'll make some decisions and lead them towards, let's leave that alone and let's focus on progress, not perfection, and defer that to continuous improvement. So with that, we do Lean Six Sigma Green Belt training. So we have a checklist if you'd be interested in that you can use the QR code. I know my time is up, so I'm going to let you go if you're running, and I will hang out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jim.